And the reason why I'm looking into number of work items and not story points or hours or days is because those are based on intuition, good feeling. They're not facts.
How useful do you see the machine learning and AI? And I'm not talking only about the generative AI.
There will be an AI mechanism behind the scene that is going to give you that answer running Monte Carlo at the same time, right? But I want to give you an advice that I wish someone had given me at the very beginning when I started my career, and literally was a game changer.
Today, we'll be discussing how teams can improve their delivery speed by focusing on best agile practices and metrics. Specifically, we'll dive into what metrics to focus on now to get best results as soon as possible. We'll learn from Sonya Siderova, who is an expert in agile analytics and the founder of Nave. So Nave offers advanced dashboards that help managers extract the most valuable data from project management tools like Jira. Sonya is also a top voice on LinkedIn, regularly sharing insightful information about this topic, so make sure to check out her profile. I believe every person who is using Agile in any shape or form will benefit from this conversation. Enjoy!
I will start with more general question in general about Agile. When does it make sense, and how we ended up with Agile after Waterfall? And does Waterfall still make sense in some cases?
Thanks for having me. First and foremost, I have to tell you, I have a very special opinion when it comes to what is Agile, right? Often teams say, okay, we're Agile, but what is it? What does this mean, right? You probably hear this all day long. We're Agile, we are running business agility initiatives. And I've heard this so many times. And in the end of the day, I believe that Agile means something very simple. To me, Agile is your ability to be able to deliver quickly, see if you are delivering what actually brings value to your customers, and then pivot if you're not. You pivot quickly so that you can change the direction and keeping up with the market. That's all what Agile means to me. And there are a lot of books, a lot of so many resources out there. That's my simple definition of it. So who is it for?
Yeah.
Agile, right? Anyone who would benefit from being quick, being fast, and being able to switch directions quickly so that they can still serve their customers. And of course, you're saying you still have waterfall, right? This is the old way of working. And you're perfectly right. There are still situations where waterfall makes a lot of sense. There are some cases where it's just the type of the work, the type of the business, the way the business operates just requires that type of working. There is nothing wrong with it. I've seen this a lot. We actually have customers who run waterfall in their organizations. They are trying to work in agile way inside the organization. They're trying to optimize internally, and they try to involve the stakeholders internally. So at least they know that if things change, they have the ability to change as well.
Yeah, what I often see is that companies think they are agile, and then there is a waterfall. The whole year is planned already, and now we are just only delivering in agile way, but the top idea is waterfall, and then we are iterating quickly, let's say, with sprint goals, within this waterfall approach. So it's agile inside, but outside it's still, quite not iterative. And the deliveries are only measurable after 7 months or whatever that you delivered the feature.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen this over and over again. And that's why when we first start the conversation around Agile, my question always is, what's the goal that you're trying to achieve by trying to be more agile? Because if the goal is to improve individuals' performance or even the performance of the teams, I would say that's not enough because we're looking at outcomes. When I talk about Agile, I'm always talking about the outcome that we're after. And the outcome we're after is like the delivery to the customer. As soon as we deliver to the customer, then it makes sense for us to be Agile. It makes sense the most because we can only know, and that's another special definition that I have when it comes to customer value. We only know if we deliver customer value as soon as it is in our customers' hands, and then they give us that feedback whether this is what they need.
Yeah, totally. So, what different approaches to Agile are there? Like, what methodologies, like with Scrum or Kanban? I don't know. What's your take on this?
There are thousands of them. I mean, from Scrum to Kanban to anything in between. And I'm not against any of it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that if you're running a team or even a business where you have never done anything, right? Just shooting in the dark and hoping that things will work out, starting from anywhere by the book is the best next step. However, I think that at some point, when you start running through, even if you're like adopting Kanban or Scrum or Safe, or it doesn't really matter, at some point, you have to look into what are the practices that you've adopted and evaluate whether they're working or not. So at some point, the most important thing is really to look into your own business context, your own clients, your own teams, and your whole business maturity altogether, and then make a decision. What is it that's working and what's serving us well, and what is it that doesn't make sense at all for us, and then start tweaking, start making changes, start running small improvement initiatives, and then tweak accordingly. And it doesn't matter how you call that in the end of the day. Honest, it helps you get to your results, the results that you're after, then you're heading in the right direction.
Awesome. Are there any approaches you think are easier to measure and tweak over time than the others? For example, is Scrum like more reliable to measure over time and find inefficiencies that we can improve, or you don't really see major differences?
I don't. Honestly, I don't. To me, it is important to get started from somewhere. Like, don't sit on the decision. Don't try to compare things and think of, okay, which one is easier to start, which one is easier to measure. Don't. Just get started, right? Like right now. Go ahead, start. Because that's the only way that you learn. That's the only way that you gather that feedback from the system and from your teams of whether whatever it is that you're doing is actually making sense for you. So just go ahead again. If you haven't started, go ahead, start with Scrum, start with Kanban. Those are fairly like easy to be adopted, even though there are tips and tricks, right? Things can go south if you're literally stuck with the book and trying to implement everything by. That's why I'm saying keep iterating. To me, being agile means just that. Just be open to try different things and learn from failure, and don't be disappointed because you always fail. It doesn't matter how much you learn, it doesn't matter where you get started, you will always be wrong, especially at the very beginning. Always. So as soon as you understand that and embrace that, the better.
Yeah, I think that's true across many aspects of life, to start and fail quick. Are there any areas of like common problems you see people encounter when they are starting with agile approach? What are the common pitfalls they may be having?
I think the major issue that I'm seeing over and over again is that people set unrealistic expectations. And probably that's the syndrome of the new shiny object. It's like, okay, so we are doing Scrum now. It doesn't work for us. What's next? okay, here is Kanban. We started doing Kanban. We've done Kanban.
Yeah.
Now, what's next? Right? I think that the major issue that comes with when it comes to getting started with Agile or any Agile way of working is that people feel like there are solutions, there are things that are going to solve all of their problems. And it's not that Kanban doesn't work or Scrum doesn't work. It's just there are certain things that don't work in your own context. So instead of, and my advice always is, instead of like trying to put a certain methodology in your box, just open your box, see where the gaps are, and then think about what are the solutions on the market available for those gaps. How can you approach a certain problem? So the first thing is that you have to define the problem that you have. And then the second is, what are the solutions that are available out there? Which one is it that we want to test and implement so that we can see if it's working or not quickly? And then once that initiative is like over, you evaluate whether this is for you.
Yeah, I also often see, and it was a problem for me as well, like to understand who owns which part of the Scrum process. And, there are Scrum masters, or is it part of the engineering manager's job or product manager? What are engineers responsible for? And I often seen a pattern where the team started and they kind of planned the sprint for future, but no one like updated the tasks to relevant columns, and then all the data basically was useless because the process itself wasn't polished enough, I think, to get something valuable out of it. It was like uh, because I see it across IT industry often that there are so many good practices, right, that it's so hard for people to choose sometimes. Okay, so and this is what you said at the beginning, with that, just start somewhere and then see where it fails and improve.
And
What Yeah.
if we can get back to this, because you're making a very good point. Who owns the process?
Yeah, I struggled with it a lot to figure out the
You're
approach.
not alone. You're not alone. I have to tell you, there are so many teams who are struggling with the same thing. Who owns the process and who owns the outcome of the process? I strongly believe that it is the team who needs to own the process. And I believe that the role of the Agile coaches and the Scrum Masters is to help the team to get to the point where they realize that they own the process. Because the people who are in the trenches are in the best positions to make improvements because they're in the trenches, they're doing the work, they're in those, they're doing that effort every single day. They're in and out every single day. So they are in the best position to suggest to see what's working, what's not working, make the changes and run those improvements. I have to tell you, this is a huge mindset shift. It's not something that can happen overnight. It's not that when you collect your teams, they already know that they are responsible for the outcomes and they have to track like lead time and cycle time and how much they deliver and work in progress and all of that stuff. That's not the case ever. I mean, literally ever. And that's probably what to me is the most important role of the Agile coaches, to help the teams get through that mindset shift and understand that it is their own process and they have the responsibility to improve it on a continuous manner. And with that come the metrics, right? With that come the measurables, because if you put like a certain goal in front of the team, and if you show the team that you value certain metrics, they will start optimizing towards these metrics. So it's not an easy thing. It's certainly not something that happens overnight, but ultimately that's the goal, because that's how you build delivery systems that self-optimize for predictability.
I want to ask you about what metrics to track and which are important. But I also, you said that the team is optimizing towards these metrics that you track, right? And I always am a little bit afraid how to prevent like cheating the game approach from engineers. So to not make the metrics the core thing of their delivery, but like to keep the process honest and then have reliable metrics on top of it, which is, like cheat the game approach and figuring out the nice way to prevent it. But going back to metrics, so you mentioned lead time and mean cycle time. So what are the core metrics you think are important and which should be tracked?
I believe that the main things that you have to track have to be strictly coupled with the delivery to the customer. So first and foremost, we're looking into the time that we need to finish something, to deliver it to the customer, not just finish it and leave it there hanging. It is in the hands of our customers. So that will be lead time, cycle time will be part of it. Throughput will be another metric, which is how much work we actually deliver for a certain period of time. Think of monthly, quarterly, even weekly,
But
bi-weekly.
by number of like story points, let's say, of efforts estimated, or
I would go with number of items.
okay.
I would go with number of items. And I know what you're going to say. Wouldn't that mean that we have to have items of the same size, right? And my answer is no. And I'm going to dig deeper there if you're interested. But number of work items is because those are based on intuition, good feeling. They're not facts. Or it is that is used for making predictions, delivery predictions, is because those are based on intuition, good feeling. They're not facts. And what I'm interested in is facts. I want to know how many items have been finished in the past month. And then the reason why I want to know that is because I do want to use probabilistic methods in order to come up with a reliable forecast. And those methods would rely on the number of work items. A good example of that is in the Monte Carlo simulation, where it is looking into your daily throughput in terms of number of items per day, completed per day. And then it is going to run a simulation saying, okay, so I'm going to take a random day in the past. And if I see that you finished 2 items, I'm going to assume that tomorrow you're going to finish 2 items. And then another random day in the past, I'm going to assume in 2 days you're going to finish that amount of tasks. And it is running it like millions of times before it actually gives you all the probabilities of what may happen in the future, like the different outcomes in terms of delivery days and the probability of you hitting that target. So one of the major things I believe is important when it comes to that approach is that the delivery prediction doesn't come as a single number. It comes as a range of numbers and the probabilities that come with each of them. And I love it so much because the question, when you will be done, is no longer relevant. The charts are giving us those numbers. The question now is, how much risk are you willing to take? If there is like 40, maybe 50% chance of you hitting a certain target, would you commit to that? I certainly won't. I certainly won't recommend you to commit to that. And here is why the size of the work doesn't matter. Because our job now, which is here is where the responsibility for the product managers come. They want to plan the work. So when we're planning the work for the next iteration, let's say, and we know there are 5 outcomes that come with different percentages of hitting those targets. Now the question is it like, what's the size of the work? what's the difficulty of the work, what's the complexity of the work, is this something that we've never done before, are there a lot of unknowns there? If the risk is high, you have to go with a high percentage and commit to a lower number of items. If it's easy, if the work is small, if you've done this before, you don't expect any challenges along the way, go ahead and commit to the lower percentile and a higher number of items. So it's again a shift in mindset, because you're no longer trying to estimate the effort. What you're trying to do now is to manage risk. And is there a chance that you will finish early? Yes, absolutely. But you won't finish later, and there is a certain percent chance that you'll meet that target.
Would you take the same approach with sprint planning? So that you rely on number of tasks and not the team's velocity?
We are doing just that. So we let teams keep doing what they're doing, and we're running capacity analysis in parallel. So what we're doing is we're looking into the past 3 to 6 months to understand on a sprint to sprint basis how many tickets have been finished per sprint. And then looking into the percentiles that come with the numbers, we compare that with the commitment that comes from the team. And if it turns out that their commitment is actually going with less than 30% of meeting that target, we're just questioning commitment. And at some point, what happens is we just using capacity analysis to feed our decision on how many free slots we have in order to meet our sprint goal. And then we start populating these slots based on which are the work items that are the most important for us to get to that place. And I have to tell you, you will be surprised how many teams just forget about story points. There is just, at some point, it just becomes obvious that you don't need to use story points any longer. First, because using capacity analysis based on throughput takes into account all the variability and complexity within your system, which is exactly what we're trying to estimate using story points. The difference is that you work with facts and not intuition or gut feeling.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah, we mentioned cycle time multiple times. Can you explain quickly what that is and what's the value of this metric?
Of course, it is the most important thing. It is the time that you need to deliver results to your clients. That's simple. Lead time is literally from the very beginning when the request arrived up until it is in the hands of your client. Cycle time is a part of it. So cycle time would be the backlog time. So the time the work would wait until it's prioritized. And then cycle time would be from the moment that the team starts working on it up until it is again in the hands of your client. So usually when we talk about optimizing delivery and speed up delivery, we start with looking at cycle time. And what we're interested in is how much of that time is waiting time. And I think this is a very important point, because what I'm seeing is that when things go south and you see that your team is like taking forever to deliver something, the first good reaction is to push them work harder, to have them work long hours. Sometimes even I see people start pointing fingers at each other. And the most surprising thing is when we start unhiding and revealing what's going on with the work and start measuring the time the work spent in each state in your workflow, it turns out that anything between 60 to 99% of the total delivery time is waiting time. No one is doing anything on it. 60 to 99%. And once you start analyzing the time spent in the different states, what I'm seeing is that sometimes you realize 40% of the delivery time is spent in some weird approval state. And the only thing that you have to do is just change the way you approve the work, and out of the sudden you start delivering 40% faster without doing anything else, without changing the way you make decisions, without having more people joining the team, without any additional investment. Such a small tweaks can make a huge difference, but you have to see that. You have to review and analyze that. And the reason why I love what we do the most is that we're moving the focus from people to the work. We start looking into the work and what's happening as it moves through the workflow, and what are the things that can change, that have to change in order to improve that process. And right after we make that analysis, we let people self-organize around the work to make that happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. As I understand what you said, so throughput is like a metric to understand the team's predictability of how much they can deliver in a given time. And then to improve their efficiency, we focus on cycle time to understand where the core issues are of the team's delivery. Or
To your question, right? How do we make sure we track the right metrics?
yeah,
You want to make sure that you never focus on just one metric alone, because that's going to lead to cheating the system and trying to optimize for the wrong reasons. The reason why I'm saying this is because you always want to track all of the metrics together. And there are three main metrics. So cycle time, throughput, and the third one is work in progress. Work in progress is the number of items that your team is working on at any one time.
yeah,
And those three metrics are tightly coupled together. As soon as you move one, the rest start to move as well. So if you try to optimize just for cycle time, probably your work in progress will go up or down. You're going to see the movement. And that's the reason why, if let's say you're seeing that your cycle time is very long and your throughput is very low, a very quick trick that you can do is to reduce work in progress. So by reducing work in progress, cycle time goes down and throughput goes up, which essentially improves the efficiency of your workflow. So the only thing that you need to do is think of, okay, I have a team of 5 people. They're working on 25 things at any one time. Probably I have to stop starting. Maybe we can change the rules and say, let's focus on finishing what we started before we start new work. And only by just doing that, you'll see how things improve. So those three things, work in progress, throughput, and cycle time, are the three main things that you want to measure. But I want to give you an advice that I wish someone had given me, like at the very beginning when I started my career, and literally was a game changer. If you're just like getting started, if you haven't done anything so far, if you haven't managed the workflow, if you've never paid attention to those metrics, the one and only thing I want you to focus on is your work in progress age. Work in progress age, WIP age. WIP age and cycle time are essentially the exact same thing. It's just WIP age is concerning only work items in progress, whereas cycle time is measured against completed work items. So if you think of WIP age, let's say I started something 3 days ago. Today, the WIP age of that task will be 3 days. So WIP age would be the time from the very beginning when the work has been started up until now.
okay,
Why is it that important? Because all the rest of the metrics, cycle time, lead time, throughput, even if we talk about advanced metrics like due date performance and flow efficiency, which is something I don't recommend to look into if you're at the very beginning of your journey, all the rest of the metrics are byproducts of how well you manage your WIP age. Everything else is a reactive measure. WIP age is WIP and WIP age are the only proactive measurements you have control over. As soon as you keep your whip age down and your whip down, and both of them are consistent, you are optimizing for everything else without even you being intentional. So if you're just getting started, forget about everything else and focus on whip age. Focus on whip age, introduce that metric in your daily calls. Make sure that your teams are measuring the age of each of the work items that are in the system. And anything that goes like above a certain threshold, this is the biggest priority for your teams. As soon as they tackle those items and then make sure that they're unblocked and they move through the workflow, you're optimizing your system for predictability, you're reducing your cycle times, you're improving your throughput, you're building a system that produces reliable delivery commitments that you can come up with in less than a minute, and you're running a system that self-optimizes.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's like a huge body of knowledge behind the whole thing. If you only do that, you're heading in the right direction.
That's awesome. Thank you. So by work in progress, you mean all the tickets that are started and have not been completed yet, right? So all the steps like code reviews or whatever else is still part of the work in progress. Yeah.
Up until it's not finished, it is in the hands of whoever requested it,
Yeah.
then it's work in progress.
Yeah. So the last aspect, which I often found difficult in my teams, but also when talking to other EMs, is that I think people undervalue the importance of refinements, like to make sure that the tasks are detailed enough or understandable enough for engineers so they know what these tickets are about. When I started with Scrum, we had like a super big task and then it was in progress for 3 weeks. What you're saying about the work in progress time, I think also it would show this metric that the tickets are not detailed enough, like that it forces you to be more intentional during refinements and challenge and like, hey, what is it about, and what's that, what this, and you have then smaller tasks which can move faster.
That's it. Exactly. So by measuring whip age, you will see those things right away. If something starts taking longer time than everything else, it will become obvious that it's too big. And there are actually two aspects here. First is when you're defining the work, the team has to be the one who decides the how. The management is responsible for the what and the why, and the team decides the how. What this means is that I believe the team has to be involved in the refinement phase, very closely involved in the refinement phase. So in order to avoid that situation. So that's one thing. The second thing is that we do want to shape the work in a way that it doesn't compromise the concept of customer value. We don't want to break the work into front-end development, back-end development, database development, and all of that stuff, because the goal is to have that little piece of work in your customer's hands. Again, in order for those people to give feedback, they should be able to touch it. They should be able to play with it. If you're breaking it down by database or front end and back end, it would be very difficult for the person who is waiting for the work to let you know, is this what they need and is this what they're looking for? So when you're splitting the work, try to think of it from the customer perspective. How can we shape it? Just that a little thing here, a little thing there. But whatever it is, as soon as it is finished, the people who this is supposed to be for, they should be able to play with it and give you feedback. That's the goal. We're looking for that feedback, and we're trying to optimize the system so that we can get to that feedback as quickly as possible.
Yeah, definitely. We discussed this before a little. In Jira, there's like a dashboard where you can see the standard deviation time for the mean cycle time. And I looked at it before, like a metric that helps with predictability so that we have a standard deviation, and the smaller it is, the more predictable the whole cycle time is, which is in my opinion, the team's performance and how fast they can deliver and their delivery in general. So what's your point of view on standard deviation? Do you think it's something people should think about, or that you find it more distracting, that, for example, throughput you were describing, and that people should lean towards that metrics more?
Okay, I probably should start with saying that one of the core values that we have at Nave is simplicity, keeping things simple. And I have to tell you, if I start talking about standard deviations or anything like this to any of our customers, they'll be, what is it? What's that about? What are you talking about? So I would like to take a step back and try to make this super simple. So we are trying, when we talk about predictability, the main goal for us is to come up with an approach that is going to enable us to make reliable delivery commitments. So all these approaches that we're talking about, probabilistic forecasting, capacity analysis, or Monte Carlo simulations, all of those approaches, and I have to argue any other approach of forecasting out there, has one prerequisite. You have to run a system that's optimal in terms of predictability in order to make these approaches work, right? So this is the main goal for us. When we talk about predictability, we do want to get to a point where the process, the delivery system, produces reliable forecast for us. So what makes a system predictable? One of the things that you have to be aware of is that there is a range of variability when it comes to your metrics. If your metrics are within those ranges, within those thresholds, then your system is considered as predictable. We have a dashboard that is doing just that. It is just connecting to your Jira. It is fetching your data. It's analyzing your process, calculates all of your metrics, and then gives you those ranges to tell you and give you feedback. Are your metrics in the healthy zone, or are you going off track? And then if we detect certain signals that you go off track, you have to take action. We're even giving you the action items that you have to go through in order to get back on track. And there is like a ton of math behind this. Standard deviation, 1, 2, 3 sigmas calculation. There are books written about that, and I wouldn't go deeper there. I would only say probably you can go ahead and check what you're seeing in Jira. My only comment would be it's too simple, and I would even say sometimes it's even inaccurate. So the most important thing that you have to know is that range of variation depends on your own process. It doesn't matter if it's high or low. It doesn't matter. That's beside the point.
Yeah.
You need to know what's the capability of your process. And if you're not happy with what you're seeing, now that's a different conversation. This means that even though your process is predictable, you do want to change things in order to get to the numbers that you desire. And then again, if you're interested, we're going to publish the links in the show notes. Go ahead, check it out. Our platform is free for 30 days, no obligations at all. Go ahead, check your own data and see whether your system is predictable. And I believe that this is important because, again, it's not about people. It's not about how efficient people are and individuals are. It's about the work. It's about how you manage the work and which are the work items that you have to focus on, get to the root cause and change the rules around it so that you don't end up in that situation again. And it's all about process improvement in the end of the day. And the reason why that dashboard is so powerful is because you don't have to know anything about Kanban, about Scrum, about Safe, about Agile. You don't need to have that extensive body of knowledge in order to read what your data is telling you and take action.
Yeah, thanks. So about actions. So you mentioned the work in progress as a nice place to start for people to optimize their workflow, right? Are there any other like quick wins you can thought of, like the that will bring the most value for the least amount of effort at the beginning?
Three main things. First and foremost, web page. Every single day, introduce the web page. So every single day, look into the age of the work. Make sure those are the three things. Like, go with an action plan with max three things so that the team knows what the priorities are. And the next day, start with evaluating the action plan, the results from it, and do the same thing. Repeat the process. That's number one. Number two, start making capacity analysis during your sprint planning sessions. Make sure that you evaluate what's the capacity of your team, how many work items they can finish for a certain sprint, what's the probability of going with that number, and then take it from there. Take that as the first step so that you have a good understanding of how much work you can schedule, and then don't spend time on refining things that you won't get to anyway. And number three, during your retrospectives, always analyze your outliers. Look for the items that have spent the most time. So we have another chart. It's called the cycle time scatter plot. It is showing all the different tasks and the time it took to deliver them. Those that are on the top are the items with the highest cycle time. Those are the items that spend the most time in the platform, in your process. So go ahead and analyze those couple of items that are on top and figure out what is it that actually caused this. Shape small initiatives, make a little tweaks, and then in next 2 weeks or 4 weeks, evaluate the results. The goal really is to not end up in that situation again. If you do those three things, you're going to get tremendous results in a very short time period.
Yeah, I think under like what you said about seeing that there are outliers and that then digging deeper and understanding what happened is super important.
I have to tell you, people often they know that they have to improve, but they're looking into the wrong problem to solve. Often there are so many things you don't know which one would make the most of the impact for you. So our platform is going to give you the top three things that you have to focus on in order to build that predictability in your workflow and have that delivery system that self-optimizes, right? So you have to prioritize. You have to be able to prioritize which is the next thing that you have to change in order to see impact. There is a thing that we call blocker clustering analysis. It is an analysis where you're analyzing from all of your blocked work how much time you wasted due to certain blocked reasons. So if you're doing this, we have a chart that is going to give you the percentage of time that you spent due to a certain blocker. If you see that, let's say, internal dependency was one type of blocker, and you spent like from the total block time, it represents only 10%, and another 70% actually represent expedite requests, you know that you have to stop interrupting the work and have the team finish what they've started before pushing more work in the process. This is what is going to make the most of the impact, because it is going to reduce those 70% of the time that you wasted because of it.
Yeah.
There is no point to work on the internal dependency because it will only do that much for you.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm saying the first reaction you will most probably have when you start using the Nave Analytics Suite is that you're going to be overwhelmed of all of the opportunities that you have. Now you have to prioritize which are the most important things for you that are going to move the needle.
That definitely makes sense. With you've mentioned how complex it is to evaluate everything, right? And there is like some real math going on behind the scenes. So how useful do you see the machine learning and AI? And I'm not talking only about the like generative AI and LLMs, but in general, like to use machine learning to enhance this data, or to how do you see, are there any opportunities that may be unblocked now or possible?
I believe that at this stage, AI has a very important role in order to deliver the results for the customers, for your customers. So what we're doing right now is we're trying to translate different forecasting outcomes to our customers without the need for them to understand what Monte Carlo is, how this works, what the percentiles do. So you would go and you would ask, okay, when I'm going to deliver item 1, 2, 3, and then there will be an AI mechanism behind the scene that is going to give you that answer running Monte Carlo at the same time, right? So it is going to tell you something like, it is in the batch of the next 20 items, which will be delivered at that date with that percent of certainty, unless you prioritize it. Or it is going to, if you can ask, I just received a certain item, when we will be done with it? And then AI is going to give you like, okay, if you start it now, here is the forecast and here are the options that you have. So I strongly believe that there is a huge potential there.
Yeah.
And I believe that the companies who don't pay attention to that are going to be left out.
Yeah, that I think it would be super valuable to product managers to be able to get these answers immediately. And then the engineering team focusing more on making it predictable and optimizing, and the product managers can work independently, let's say, to get all the answers they need to prioritize and plan ahead properly.
Yeah, and I believe that it is going to be easier for them to do their job. It is going to become even easier to make reliable decisions.
Yeah.
Because again, we are not going to use our gut feeling or intuition to come up with those decisions. It's going to be the data that is going to support us in making those decisions. Because I believe that's how you build credibility, by making reliable decisions and be on top of the work.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Sonia. It was really nice having you, and I learned a lot, and probably others as well. So yeah, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you.